Okay, Lela.
I am Lela Zurick, and I was born in Italy in 1900, August the 24th, and I came to Louisville with my parents in 1901.
Where did you live when you came here, Lela?
Well, when I left Italy when I was 9 months old, and we settled in Hannah, Wyoming. And then from then on, 1901, July the 4th, we came to Louisville. And with my parents, the folks were farmers in Italy, and then my father became a coal miner. And he worked in the coal mines until he died.
When you first came to Louisville, where was your home site? Where did you live?
Right on LeGrand Avenue in the 1,000th Grand Avenues. And it was a little tiny home, and the folks built 5 rooms there. And we grew up in the same home. And just as little girls, we lived there all our lives, and that's about it. As long as we lived in the same house.
How many children were in your family, Lela?
There were 3 children. There was Josephine, she was born in 1903, and Idas was born in 1906.
And did they come from Italy too?
No, they were born in Louisville.
And how many children do you have?
I have one son, Vern,
And what does he do?
and he is a physicist, and he works for NOAA, the Bureau of Standards.
And where did you go to school?
I went to school at the St. Louis Catholic School when I was a little girl, and then when I was 8 years old, I went to the Little Red Schoolhouse, and Mrs. Hamilton was my school teacher. And I went to school till I was 16 years old, and I went 2 months in the 11th grade, and I got a job in the post office as a clerk and assistant postmaster to George Longmore.
In Louisville?
In Louisville. Then I was married in 1922 to Joseph Zurick, and he was born in Louisville, 1900, June the 9th.
And what was his occupation?
He was a miner, coal miner.
Lela, where was the post office located?
The post office was where the country kitchen is. And they still have that little old mailbox there where we put all the letters in. It's the original, letter carrier.
Lela, could you tell us some of the things in your earlier life? For instance, how did you celebrate your Christmas, and what did your parents do for Christmas dinners and gifts and so forth?
Well, when we were small, we didn't have much of a Christmas. We were too poor. And as the years went by, things became financially better. And we always had a family gathering. We just had one relative here, John Biella. Of course, there was a lot of the relative, a brother to my father. My mother had no one here. So we'd congregate together and just have a lovely Christmas.
And how did you remember Louisville in those earlier days?
I loved Louisville in the earlier days. It was just beautiful to me as a child. I grew up with on that 1,000 Grand Avenue street there where everything was just lovely and mostly Italians. And we all got along well. All the children was about the same age. And I can remember the beautiful fields where we would go, and play. And, well, there were just about 3 houses. And here's another thing I want to tell you, Virginia, maybe you'll be interested in this. My father came here in 1901 to Louisville. 1902, he had his citizen's papers. And Frank Giordinelli helped him, your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather. Mm-hmm.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Lela, did you grow a lot of your own things? Like you mentioned a little while ago, you said you had a horse.
Mm-hmm.
Did you also raise chickens and have gardens at this time?
Oh, yes. All the old folks, they had their gardens and chickens. And we didn't have a cow, but we had an old horse named Speck. And every Sunday, my mother and father dressed the 3 girls up in white dresses, these starched dresses, with a big white bow in our hair. And we had a surrey. And it was a beautiful, shiny one with the red fringe all around it. and big red and yellow shiny wheels. And of course, our main ride was right through Main Street, up and down Main Street, and nearly everyone had a horse.
Dragging me.
You drug Main Street instead of a car in your
That's
Surrey.
right, and I'll tell you, we just loved that. Then another thing that I dearly, dearly loved was the holidays, like July the 4th, 4th of July. We'd go down to the old ballpark, and of course they had the band come out, Mr. Jaco. He organized a wonderful band, and they'd have a parade, and then we'd all go down to the ballpark, and they had a bandstand there, and we'd bring our lunch, and we had a glorious time. It was just wonderful.
Lela, didn't your parents have a little store at one time?
Oh yes, they had a store from 1922 to I think it was 1950.
What kind of a store was it?
Oh, it was a general merchandise store with a pickle barrel, threads, and groceries, notions,
Where was it
lunch
located?
meats, right where the laundry mat is now on Main Street.
What was the name of it, Lela?
Joe Biella's grocery store. So that was one great thing too.
Did you girls work in the store?
No. Mm-mm. None of us worked in the store. My sisters worked in drugstores, and I was working in the post office.
Okay, let's get on to Marian, and then we'll come back.
All right, that'll be fine.
You want my name first?
Yes, please.
Well, I'm Emillienne Delacourt, known as Marian, because I got that name when I went to school, and I kept it until I had to sign legal papers. And I was born March the 4th, 1903, in France. And my folks came to this country in 1905, and we settled in Kansas. And from Kansas, we went into Illinois on account of the coal mines in Kansas were on strike. My husband being a coal miner for 49 years. So we went there in Illinois, and we stayed there and until the mine shut down. Then we moved to Michigan in Detroit. And from Detroit, word got slack over there. We went to Chicago. And in Chicago, I became sick. And the doctors told me I had to come west, either to Arizona or Colorado.
And how old were you then, Marian?
When I came,
Yes.
well, we came here in 1930. We've been here 47 years. Yeah.
You were already married then. When
Now, I got married to Desire in Kansas in 1919.
Now, can you tell us what your first impression was of Louisville when you first came, and where did you live?
Well, when we first came, we lived in Frederick for 1 year. And then we found out this little house was for sale for $800. So it needed a lot of repairs, but we bought the house and we repaired it. And then along the way came WPA. And we got a lot of help from WPA. Because, here in Colorado, the mines used to shut down in the summertime. And we just could not go back to the city because we came here in a Model T Ford. Took us 4 days from Chicago to here to arrive here in Frederick. And when we first got into our house, there was no Roosevelt Street because the Acme mine dump was still there. We had to go clear around to get on Main Street to come downtown. But those were the good old days.
What did you use for heat in those days, Marian?
Well, we had coal stove. My husband was a coal miner, and we used to go and get all our wood for the coal, for the stoves, and we bought our coal. And when we couldn't buy coal, we used to go pick coal. We'd pick coal along the dumps. And we were really happy. We had chickens, we had rabbits, we had pigeons. And I took many sunbaths, which Colorado is very good for, and it brought me back to my health.
How many children did you have, Marian?
I have one son, Edmund DeHalicourt. He lives in Golden, and his employment is for general manager for Warner Company in Denver.
And he is a graduate of the Louisville High
Yes,
School.
he's a graduate of Louisville High School. He graduated in 1937. And after he graduated, the Navy took him, and he was in the Navy for 6 years. And when he came back with his bride from Florida, and he and his wife have 4 nice children, 3 girls and 1 boy, and they have given us 7 great-grandchildren.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Lela, getting back to you, when you were a youngster, going to the Catholic school, tell us a little bit about what the school looked like.
Well, the school was lovely to me. I liked the school, and I loved the nuns. They were so kind and so good to us. And it got so, the school itself was lovely. You know, we all sat together in one room. All the grades were together. And the only reason that my mother took us out of the Catholic school to go to public school, they were starting to charge tuition. And of course, when I went to public school, I loved it. We sang a lot there. And Mrs. Hamilton, she'd have us sing all these lovely songs where we didn't do so much praying. We prayed a lot at the Catholic school. And I liked it.
But how did they heat the school and this sort of?
With coal. And the older boys at the school would have to go to the priest's home and bring the coal to the school. And so many were assigned to take care of that job, and it was taken care of very nicely.
Lela, you didn't have desks. Did you sit at little tables?
We sat at the long desks.
Long desks.
The long desks, 4 or 5 at one desk. Well, you call it a bench. We called it a bench then.
Lela, when you come to Louisville, was there cobblestones or just plain dirt streets in the city?
Everything was dirt streets. There were no cobblestones. There was nothing. Where I lived, and downtown, of course, I don't remember too much about downtown, but I think they were wooden streets. And I remember some of the little old stores, like George Cummings. He had a little store there. And then the Zuricks had a store. And then I remember the different stores, the large stores. One was down here where Joe Colachi has his filling station. And that was a nice store then.
That was a drugstore.
The drugstore was across the street.
that a company
Colachi's.
store?
Drugstore, yes, where the filling station is.
Yeah,
Lela, you said the streets were made of wood. Do you mean the sidewalks?
I mean the sidewalks.
Sidewalks.
The sidewalks were made of, they had the wooden sidewalks, not the streets. It was all mud.
Now, did you all have running water in your homes? Or
Oh,
did
no.
Did you have wells? How did you get your water?
At first, I remember we had the wells, and then after they had the hydrants. And we packed
You don't
it in the
remember
house.
what year the hydrants
No,
came?
I don't. I don't remember that.
And was there any saloons or something in town?
Oh, there was a lot of saloons, yes. These coal miners were hard-working men. And on Saturday nights, they'd like to go down to saloons. And they were all good men, good, strong men, and they'd go down for their little drink. And they had a good time.
Marian, you came here in 1930, so you were, you came here right in the middle of the Depression.
Yes.
What were the times like when you first arrived in Louisville?
Well, there was a lot of welfare. They were getting stamps to get sugar and things like that. But we never did have to because my husband got a job. And we were living on what he was making and what we was raising around the house. And it wasn't so hard to live in those days because everything just seemed like it came naturally. And then I got involved in politics and talking about heat. I worked in the little union building there on Main Street, And we had a great big potbelly stove, and whoever sat by the stove, their right side of their face would burn, their left side would be cold. And then I belonged to quite a few things here. I got active in a lot of things.
Speaking of welfare, my folks never accepted a penny from welfare in any way, shape, or form. We went and worked in the sugar beets. And we had one dress. We were poor, but we never accepted 1 cent from anyone.
Lela, where did you work in the sugar beets? Was that over at Davidson?
That was over at Davidson. Mm-hmm.
And how would you get there?
Well, we had to quit school for about 2 months. We just didn't go to school for 2 months in the winter time. And well, from October to November, we were out of school. And my dad had this nice little horseback. We got there and we lived in a 2-room, a little house there. And we stayed there for the 2 months till the sugar beets were all taken care of.
Marian, do you remember anything about the strike when the militia come out here?
No, that was just a little bit before we came here. They were just getting settled.
Do you remember anything about the Durban strike, the Durban wreck?
No. All I remember is when Monarch blew up.
Can you tell us something about that?
Well, I belonged to the American Legion Auxiliary then, and we do good to the community, so we got busy and got baskets for food for the people that were depressed. One of the ladies that I can remember was Mrs. DeSantis, Adeline DeSantis, and she's always been so grateful to us since she was rewarded with such kindness from the American Legion and the auxiliary.
I remember that. My brother-in-law, Tom Stevens, was killed in that explosion. And it was early in the morning. He was one man that was not supposed to work that night shift. But some friend of his asked him to go to work that night. And he went to fill in that place. And it was 3 days and 3 nights before they found his body. And my sister Josephine always felt, well, there was hope. But he and Mr. Steve Davis, they lived across the street, were the 2 men that were found last.
That was that little Mrs. Davis?
Yes, right across the street from Josie. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember anything about the strike, Lela?
Yes, I do. I was 10 years old when they had that strike. And I can remember, you know, the old Frenchy house there, the Frenchy house. All of the neighbors on that street, we all ran into that house and we prayed. And of course, the men, the coal miners, went out with their guns. And they went up to the field, you know, up where that little, they called them scabs at that time, the non-union men. And it was a hard strike. It was just a terrible thing. People just didn't have food either at that time. It was bad. Long, hard strike.
Was your father involved in the strike?
Oh, yes, he was. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And do you remember anything then about the next strike, which would have been the wobbly strike?
Oh, yes, I remember that too. My husband didn't work for months and months, but we seemed to get along fine.
What did you do? How did you live? How did you get your groceries with no income?
Well, I'll tell you how we got the groceries. The merchants were very kind, and they charged the food that we ate. And when my husband went back to work, we paid every penny back. So that's the way a little town is. They share your sorrows, and I don't know, you just get along in a small town. I'm not against growth at all. I think it's wonderful that the town is growing. But it's different. The people don't share this wonderful friendship that we had when we were younger.
Did you have any problem, Lela? Did you say you were born in Italy?
I was born in Italy.
Well, when you came here, did you have any problem? Of course, you were quite young.
Yeah.
But did you have any problem communicating?
Oh, no. Mm-mm. I was a year old when I came to Louisville, and you know how children are. They learn the language immediately. And my mother and father were speaking the language in 6 months.
They spoke.
They did. They read every newspaper they could find, and they had good neighbors that was teaching them. And they really were very advanced in speaking the English language.
You didn't get no special instructors to learn
Not at
the
all. The
language?
neighbors. They had wonderful neighbors that would help them. And one neighbor, I think it was Mrs. What was her name? Her husband was Police Robinson. Her husband was a policeman at the time.
They used to call him Bacon.
Yeah, and she was such a wonderful woman. She even taught my mother how to cook these nice dishes, how to stretch curtains. So you see, they used to help each other. They didn't care what nationality you were. They all mixed and shared their sorrows and happiness.
Marian, your mother lived here.
Yes.
When did she come to Louisville?
Well, I think Mother came here in 1942.
Oh,
And she had lost my father and my sister in Chicago, so she came here to live with me.
well, she didn't come right from France.
No, we settled in Kansas from France. And then when she was left alone, she came here, and she died at the age of 96 in a nursing home in Boulder.
When you came to this town, did you know anyone?
No, when we came to Frederick, and I was told to come here for my health, we had one lady that we thought that she was living in Frederick. And by chance, we knew her name, and the letter got to her. She was living in Firestone. So she was kind enough to answer our letter and tell us to come, that there was work. And there was a place to stay at her house if we didn't find anything.
But when you moved into Louisville, did you know anyone here?
No, not at the time.
How did you feel the people, accepted you when you moved right in?
Well, we had some real nice neighbors, and I got neighborly with all my neighbors, and then I gradually learned to find out of a lot of other friends that I still have today that we were introduced to.
What did you do for recreation, Lela?
Well, we had the old Red Man Hall, and we go to dances there. That is when I was 15, 16. Of course, everybody went. And we had the finest music, and they were big dances because everybody knew one another. And then another thing, when I was a child, a little girl in Louisville, we all went to different homes. The parents would take the children, and we'd go to the different homes, and they would eat, and they'd have dancing, and they'd sing. That wonderful friendliness existed all through my childhood and as I grew up.
Lela, do you remember anything about the Ku Klux Klan and about the bootlegging days and gambling days in Louisville?
I remember about the bootlegging days, and of course, and the Ku Klux Klan. One evening, we had moved up to our home at 1000 Grand Avenue, and I think Vernon was 5 years old. And I heard so much commotion, and I looked out the window, and I saw all these men walking down the street in their white gowns and torches. And of course, we always felt we knew who some of the members of the Ku Klux Klan were. But I remember that.
What year was that?
Let's see, Vernon was born in 1922. I think it was, I may be wrong on this date, but it was between 1927 and 1930.
What did they do?
I don't know what they did. I never was very much interested in the Ku Klux Klan.
You just saw them marching.
That's all.
And what do you remember about the bootlegging?
Well, many of our neighbors were bootlegging, and I think that some people became very wealthy, with the bootlegging. But I don't think it was very many people from town that were buying the liquor. I think it was the Boulder people. Tush, tush, they'll be mad at me.
Do you remember any incidences that happened in connection with it?
No, I don't. Mm-mm.
Did the people in Louisville think that was terribly wrong, bootlegging?
Well, I think my folks felt that it was against the law. Of course, there was neighbors that bootlegged, and he always felt it was against the law to do that.
Did your father make his own wine?
My father made his own wine, but he never sold it.
This for his family?
Uh-huh.
Do you remember anything about the bank robbery that they had here in Louisville in 1912?
Well, I really don't remember much about that.
How about the time of the big snow? Do you remember that?
All the big snow was nice and big, and everybody was shoveling off their roofs. You know, they afraid the roof would cave in. It's just nature's way.
What year was that, do you remember?
Was it 1920?
Wasn't it 1920, 1921?
27.
27? Mm-hmm. 1920, yes, it must have been, because we was living in the other house then. The new homes, Louisville is a city of contrasts and a city undergoing rapid changes, different generations, a different world, with the new houses, with the young couples and the little children, just like it used to be, young couples, little children. I am not concerned about the growth of Louisville. It's good, and I really think that it's for the better of the town. Louisville was a small town when the coal mines once flourished here. It has had its ups and downs. Now that's the way I really feel about Louisville.
Progress of the town, it's really nice for the younger generation, but the older generation can't see it that way. They like to see it the way it used to be. And
I don't know anyone anymore.
there are so many people that we don't know, and before, we knew everybody in town. And as I was saying, the WPA did progress a lot of things in the city. There wasn't nobody that was idle. Everybody went to work. They didn't get money just sitting down waiting for it. They were put to work.
They built our high school, didn't they?
Pardon?
They built a school.
They built
Yes,
a
they did.
school. They built all the sidewalks that we have in town.
That's right.
And I remember, and they helped with the sewers. And I remember when it was real cold and they were working on my block, I made very many pots of coffee for them boys. I felt sorry for them, but they were working. They were working boys. They got the job done.
And your mother was awfully kind too to them. She'd crochet and she'd give scarves and things away to.
Well, then came the war. And I wrapped many bandages with Lily Watson. And I also took care of the blood bank here. And I had very many blood donors in which is the middle school now. And I worked with a lot of the girls. They was very nice to work with me. And that was really nice because there was very lot of blood donated for the boys.
Did they come right up to the school and you took it from them right there?
Yes, we fixed the gym with sheets, and we had different rooms where they would come in and sign up. Had cots for the men because the men's were the one that was giving us a lot of trouble. And well, the state was really proud of us over here in Louisville for what we done.
Did you ever work on the rationing board, Marian?
Yes, I did. I worked with Lily Watson on the rationing board.
And what products were rationed during the war?
Sugar, coffee, and
Gasoline?
Meat?
yes, and meat. And I can recall when we were on the rationing board that we had a lot of people that used to lend each other's kids to come back and get for seconds. But as we knew they were poor people, we didn't say nothing. Lily and
Shoes
I.
were rationed too?
Pardon?
Shoes?
Shoes.
You're only allowed 2 pair of
There and here.
There was just a lot of things rationed.
And
And-
gas?
Huh?
Gas?
Gasoline. Well, in those days, there wasn't too many cars. A lot of people did a lot of walking in those days.
Well, they weren't commuting like they are in these days.
No, we used the train to go to Denver. There wasn't hardly any bus here either. It just a train when I first came here.